Hello, I'm Michael Wern, and this is The Road to Postcapitalism.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
I was born in the year 1995 in London, Ontario. Capitalistic ideology, neoliberalism, had already begun to flourish and would only continue to increasingly grow rampant as the years passed. For myself and everyone else in my generation, all we have ever known is neoliberalism. This is normal. This is how the world works, and to imagine anything else as our primary economic base just seems, well, impossible. As British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher stated, there is no alternative. A conservative message to all that the only way a modern society can develop is through free markets, free trade, privatization, and capitalistic globalization, also known as neoliberalism. However, does this really mean there is no alternative? Are we simply stuck in an economy that has turned humanity into individuals seeking the most possible consumption, destroying anything that gets in our way, even our own homes? Journalist and author Naomi Klein seems to think otherwise. Klein recently released her newest book in 2014 called This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate, a call to all that there is an alternative. It involves the radical disassembly of capitalism in order for the planet to avoid devastating climate change. Was Margaret Thatcher wrong? Is this humanity's alternative? In order to reach the world of post-capitalism, we must first continue to speed down our highway of neoliberalism in order to reach another path to which we can transition to. A path that will lead us to paradise. After reading Klein's book, one feels a strong sense of motivation, seeking to help dismantle capitalism in order to save our planet before it's too late. This is Klein's purpose for the book. She is trying to spread mass awareness to spark change among complacent civilians. Klein focuses on the idea that it is possible for climate action to be taken while under a capitalistic reign. However, it is not happening, and what needs to be done just simply is not. The policymakers are too concerned with pleasing bureaucrats, causing them to ignore the calls for change that are needed. This corruption is why she states that capitalism can no longer exist if we are to combat our global crisis. Klein also argues that green capitalism, which is the idea that we can use market-based solutions in order to fix our deteriorating environment, is not sufficient. She advertises the ideas of small communities and co-ops all working in harmony using renewables to be the ideological way of life. This will keep the world from becoming even warmer and avoiding the dangerous levels of 3 or 4 degrees Celsius of warming. She also calls for profitable companies to forfeit trillions of dollars in the name of saving the planet. Altogether, a grassroots movement that will change everything as we know it. This is an interview with Klein on BBC's Newsnight with Evan Davis. It focuses on Klein's argument to radically change capitalism.
Now, you don't quite do this in the book, but I'm interested in what a society that you would support, what it would look like, okay? In really practical terms, how would I get to work? What would I live in? Mm-hmm. What kind of food would I eat? How would I heat my home? Do these sorts of questions. How different would your society be to the one you critique in the book?
Well, you're right that the book is not, a checklist of an ideal society. But I think that the most important thing is that our society would live within the boundaries of what our planet can take. So we know we need to be cutting our emissions by between 8 to 10% a year because we've waited so long. Those numbers come from the Tyndall Centre here in the UK, a very trusted institution. And in order to do that, we need to expand the parts of our economy that are already low carbon. We need to roll out renewable energy. We need to move very, very quickly to 100% renewable energy. We know that the technology is there. The cost is getting very low. We've seen the price of solar drop by 80% in 5 years. So the technology is there, but there is this problem that we have to burn fossil fuels in order to get off fossil fuels. So we also need societies in which we consume less. So we would have to have cities. You talked about how you'd get to work. I don't know exactly how you'd get to work, but preferably we'd all be taking more transit. We would be biking. It might look a little bit more like Copenhagen than London, which isn't terrible if you visited. Urban design would be a really key part because it isn't just about flipping the switch from one energy system to another. It's also about designing more intelligently so that we reduce our energy needs. And the technologies are brilliant and they are there.
What you've described, which incidentally are a lot of technologies that capitalism has produced, like solar panels, and no, but I mean,
the state has played a significant role.
What you haven't said there is why you'd need to overthrow the entire economic system to get at that. You could say to private companies, look, guys, in 2030, there'll be no more coal burning in Western countries or no more gas burning.
And why haven't our politicians said that? And what I'm saying is that we cannot do the sensible things that we need to do because we have a political and economic system that is based on short-term profits and short-term growth.
But you're blaming the companies. But you're blaming the companies who are the agents of capitalism. But the reason why the politicians haven't done that and made companies get rid of all these fuels, I would imagine, is that it would involve telling the people a rather painful choice a rather painful
I don't think that's true.
Choice.
I mean, I certainly, that's
You don't
certainly,
think it would be painful for a politician to tell us that energy prices will be 3 times what they are?
I think that there are ways that they could do it in a way that was much more painful for the fossil fuel companies than for everyday consumers. I think we have been biased in favor of policies that have passed on the price of this transition to consumers because our governments have not embraced a basic polluter pays principle. When the tobacco companies eventually were forced to pay a big chunk of the cost of helping people to quit smoking and to pay some of the health costs because they knew about the connection between cancer and smoking for a long time and they didn't act. The fossil fuel companies have known this for a long time. They're digging us in deeper. So we've had really unjust responses to climate change, which have unfairly
I'm trying to
passed
understand
the
why
bill.
you have to overthrow. I mean, basically, the thesis you've given so far blames the governments for not doing anything about it.
Well, actually,
rather than blaming the companies.
It blames the collusion between governments and fossil fuel companies.
Tobacco makes a good point here, though, doesn't it? Because it does show that when governments, against the will of the companies, the tobacco companies in that case, you can put the taxes up and actually you really get smoking down.
So
well,
why
it is
haven't
down.
they?
It is.
But why haven't they done it with fossil fuels? I mean,
because it's painful for the voters.
I don't think it's because
companies.
It's painful for the voters. I think it's because it's painful for them because they get penalized in the form of losing campaign contributions. They get attacked with television ads. That's certainly the barrier to change in North America. And the outsized power of the most profitable industry on the planet is warping our political system. And the argument I make in the book is that a big part of the reason why we have failed to address this crisis, when we have addressed other crises in the past, whether it's a hole in the ozone layer or public health crises, is because this one hit us at the worst possible moment, at the end of the 1980s, at the moment of maximal free market triumphalism, when our governments embraced the idea that there was something wrong with regulating corporations and taxing polluters and intervening in the market.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds just to say what mechanism you use to deliver, to get to the world you're wanting. Clearly capitalism isn't it for you. Just 20 seconds.
Well, look, I think we need a whole range of policies. It's not about overthrowing the system, but it's about radically changing it. And right now, this system can't even deliver the reformist model that you're talking about.
There's an old fable told by an ancient Greek fabulist by the name of Aesop. It depicts a meeting of mice in which they are discussing what they can do about their sly enemy that continually slips past their guard. One mouse suggests to put a bell on the cat, therefore it can never sneak up on them again. All the mice applaud this idea until an old wise mouse speaks up and asks how one will put the bell on the cat, and who will do it. All the mice went silent. The moral of the story is that it's easy to propose impossible remedies. The reason I bring this up is not because I think Klein's idea of dismantling capitalism is impossible. I bring it up because she is suggesting such an extreme remedy to be done in an impossible amount of time. There is no quick fix for climate change. We have waited too long to seriously address the damaging effects of it, and now we must brace for impact. We must proceed forward not in the fastest way possible, but in the most proper way. Then the planet will never have to deal with this type of global crisis ever again. Naomi Klein suggests that market-based mechanisms like green capitalism and carbon cap and trade to slow climate change are not viable options. She states that these solutions are not sufficient to address climate action. A quote from her book, This Changes Everything, reads, "Policies that simply try to harness the power of market by minimally taxing or capping carbon and then getting out of the way won't be enough." Page 125. However, I think she is wrong in this aspect. Not only has carbon cap and trade been proven to be a significant form of reducing carbon emissions, but it is also the best way to eventually transition into 100% renewables. Carbon cap and trade has becoming more popular over the past years, being adopted most famously by the European Union and California, one of the world's role models for climate action. California has adopted the carbon cap and trade model, and so far it's working. They began in January 2013 and have continually decreased the amount of emissions the state allows each year significantly. They are striving to reduce their corporate carbon emissions to 1990 levels by 2020, and to continually increase that restriction annually to reach levels of climate safety by 2050. This is just one example of a highly regulated market-based mechanism that can work to combat climate change. Imagine if every state, province, country implemented this same model and had the same goal, the world would be on track to halting the climate crisis by 2050. Also, Klein states that capitalism does not allow for the move to 100% renewable energy due to trade rules that have been established via trade partnerships, such as the North American Free Trade Agreement. However, she forgets to mention that British Columbia in 2007 implemented a renewables-only policy that has seen the cancellation of many proposed gas and coal projects. It has also seen the production of many renewable energy facilities without violating trade rules and regulations. So picture a worldwide coalition to end the climate crisis, where strict rules and policies with legal implications were forced upon every country. Capitalism is not only what can work, but it's also what we need right now. Until cities' infrastructure has been adapted for a renewables-only society, capitalism is necessary. Just by using the last two policies I mentioned, a nation could 1. Prevent any new coal or gas-powered energy plants from being created, halting carbon emissions in that sector, and 2. Rampantly restrict current emission levels, leading to a goal of 0% by the century's end, sooner if possible. This would lead to a nearly emission-free Earth. I know the timeline is not ideal, but it's a hand that was dealt to us by the generations that came before us. We must do what they did not. We must be smart. This crisis is too great for us to make wrong decisions. The lives of many nations depend on it. So if highly regulated market-based mechanisms are the proper path to a sustainable future, then why are we seeing such a negative view upon them that Naomi Klein is offering us? Mark Jacquard, professor of sustainable energy from Simon Fraser University, offers some insight for us in his article, "I Wish This Changed Everything." He discusses the issues why we are not seeing results from green capitalism and market-based climate mechanisms. First, humanity is suffering from a deadly addiction. We are hooked on fossil fuels, and we cannot simply stop using them cold turkey as Naomi Klein suggests we should. Just as a drug addict kicks their habit, we must wean ourselves off the extreme extractivist ideology we currently view the world in. We must realize with the continued use of them is a looming day of reckoning that we are just seeing the beginning of now. Klein believes this is the fault of capitalism, and that in order to kick the addiction, we must first kick capitalism. Next, the climate change crisis will be the greatest issue of this century. However, it is slow-moving and for the most part, it is invisible, which in turn creates a very slow reaction to solve the problem. This is also why capitalism must be used in order to get the ball rolling if we are ever to fully transition to a post-capitalistic world. Capitalism is a necessary evil. People are fearful of change. It is much easier to get many people to change small parts of their lives than to try and persuade them to change everything about their lives. They will simply deny the facts and will refuse to give up their current consumer lifestyles. In order for society as a whole to shift toward a renewable future, we must take the steps through market-based mechanisms until we are at a point of renewable sustainability. Then, and only then, may we start to dismantle capitalism. Lastly, climate change is a problem for the entire planet. Therefore, it requires action from the entire planet. Action that currently cannot be agreed upon. The climate talks in Paris are the 21st of its kind. The 21st time the world has met to discuss the problems of pollution and the warming planet. And still there has been no significant compromises amongst all the nations thus far. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, "The enemy of mine enemy is my friend." This is the view that all nations of planet Earth need to perceive in order for there ever to be a chance of curbing the climate crisis and averting global catastrophe. However, each nation is solely focused on the prosperity of their own as opposed to the Earth as a whole. In order to see successful integration of highly regulated market-based mechanisms, we must solve the problems of fossil fuel addiction, fear of change, and sovereignty of nations. Humans must come together as one. The consequences, if we do not, are far too great.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
So what if our hopes for change don't happen? What if Klein's predictions are right? Policymakers fail to manufacture the significant economic changes the planet needs to see. Climate change continues escalating past dangerous levels, with the state still not taking action. What happens next? Revolution.
From behind, time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
The only way highly regulated market-based mechanisms can begin our climate action mission is to first be set up by those in power. The people we have elected to speak for us must execute strict regulations upon corporations with legal implications pending their byproduct. Without the people in power creating policies that will see 100% renewables in the near future, a strict and continuous carbon cap and trade policy, and a global restructuring of infrastructure among nations, climate change will not be stopped. We the people must step in and take action. We must see that our home, our planet, will continue to be a safe haven for all of its family. There is no option for failure.
That's when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away.
Best-selling author Chris Hedges is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and a vocal anti-capitalist, to which he has written his new book, Wages of Rebellion. It discusses the social and psychological factors of what it takes for a revolution of the masses. Hedges describes the word hope as a paralyzing disease that can pacify citizens into complacency. We just keep hoping and never actually do anything to change what is wrong with our society. According to Hedges, in order to see the change we need for the world, we must stand up and act. The way we can do this is through acts of sustained civil disobedience by a critical mass of citizens. The revolution must be non-violent, as with violence brings war, and we cannot be waging war with the people who make the policies. We need to be showing them that what they're doing will no longer be tolerated. We need to scare them. Acts of sustained civil disobedience must aim to destroy the system of corporate power through committed projects of obstruction and non-cooperation among a critical mass of citizens. We must refuse to believe the lies the state will spin in order to reinstate complacency. As Hedges says in the next clip, we have a moral imperative to stand up. This is an interview on Vice News with journalist Jon Snow discussing Hedges' new book, Wages of Rebellion, and what it takes to be a rebel in modern times.
People are breaking down. I mean, you should read, Chomsky points this out, and he's right. Read Stacks. This is the guy who flew his Cessna into the IRS building in Austin, Texas. But you should read his manifesto, where he talks about living in a rundown project, everybody's eating dog food. I mean, that's real. And this kind of mania for hope that has infected even the left is a political pacifier. Everybody is kind of addicted to these happy thoughts, and that keeps us complacent.
So I've been reading Wages of Rebellion. I wanted to ask you, do you think a revolution could happen in North America?
Well, I hope so. It's all we have left. I think when you look at all of the ingredients that go into creating revolt, the ingredients are there. We are going to have to destroy the system of corporate power by non-cooperation, by obstruction, and by refusing to be fooled by these very clever political carnivals, Canada having just finished one, that cough up these ineffectual figures that are going to do nothing to reverse C-51, which is the very draconian security and surveillance bill, in some ways worse than the Patriot Act. You've got the tar sands. I mean, the Liberal Party's not going to touch that. In the same way that Obama didn't touch security. It's up to us, and it means acts of sustained civil disobedience. We have a moral imperative to stand up, if not for ourselves, for those who come after. That one revolts finally not for what they can achieve, but for who it allows them to become. And that we can't use the word hope if we don't revolt. If we remain passive, then we are accepting the death sentence that's being handed to us by these corporate forces. There's a passage in Kissinger's memoirs, and no one should ever buy the book, where it's, I think, 1971, and there are tens of thousands of anti-war protesters surrounding the White House, which is what we have to get back to. And Nixon has taken empty city buses end to end and put them all around the White House to protect the White House. And he's looking out the window, wringing his hands, going, "Henry, they're going to break through the barricades and get us." And that's exactly where we want all people in power to be. That's our goal.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
The idea of blockadia that Klein brings up in This Changes Everything is a form of civil disobedience that Hedges talks about. It is a growing movement to slow the fossil fuel industry from expanding. In blockadia, people gather on hot-button environmental locations, such as the sites for the proposed Keystone Pipeline, and block the corporation's ability to proceed through many different ways. An example is one Eleanor Fairchild, a 78-year-old Texas landowner that stood in front of bulldozers that were going to destroy her home. This grassroots movement that is becoming increasingly populous is what everyone must participate in. We need to gain momentum and force the policymakers to realize that this is what the people want, and we will not take no for an answer. If our state will not protect us, we must protect ourselves. The people must unite and become the catalyst for change.
I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
Optimism is a strategy for making a better future, because unless you believe that the future can be better, you are unlikely to step up and take responsibility for making it so. Noam Chomsky. One of the hardest things for humans to do is to predict that which is yet to come. We can take clues from the past and ideas from the present, but knowing 100% of what lies ahead of us is simply impossible. However, as Chomsky said, without optimism, we will lack the motivation to make the future the place we hope it will be. Paradise. Awarded journalist, author, and broadcaster Paul Mason and his new book, Postcapitalism, A Guide to Our Future, discusses what he believes the future will hold, as well as how we as a society may get there. Postcapitalism is our future, and it looks like this. Nations will unite and reach an accord to see the end of the climate crisis, an accord for the whole world to follow. Global emissions will reduce to halt warming at 2 degrees Celsius. Present technology will replace nearly all needs for the use of fossil fuels. The world will begin to stabilize once again. New technology will increase the ease of the transition to a carbon-free planet. General intellect will create a world with $0 goods. Goods that cost nothing to make and will cost nothing to obtain. Work and wages will become delinked. The world will be happier consuming less, and capitalism will no longer be able to adapt to the new diverse economy. It will wither away. With the death of capitalism, we'll make way for a new economic ideology, post-capitalism. This will bring everyone in a society a basic income, a paycheck for simply existing. Artificial intelligence and machines will replace 40 to 50% of human jobs. These people can now spend more time improving society and living their lives in meaningful ways. Communities will prosper through the communal efforts of all citizens. Everyone will do a small part so we can all live happily and safely. We will take over the ideology of a gift economy, an ideology that believes in a mode of exchange where valuables are not traded with the expectation of reciprocation, just the well-being of my fellow humans. As Karl Marx said, the sense and enjoyment of other men have become my own appropriation. In other words, I will find happiness in helping my fellow humans, and my fellow humans will find happiness in helping me. I believe that one day humanity will free itself from the shackles we have locked on to one another. Let's walk this road together. Remember what potential the future holds for you. Remember what potential you hold for the future of yourself, your family, your country, and your planet. Together, we are strong.